You know, when we talk about a national budget, the numbers can get so big they just feel fake. But here's the thing, every single peso comes from the taxpayer. That means it's our money. So figuring out where it goes isn't just interesting, it's our duty. Today, we're going to follow the money right into the proposed 2026 budget for the Philippine House of Representatives.
Let's just start with this number right here, 87,110,000 pesos. Take a good look at it. What do you think that could be? The price tag for a new hospital wing? A big public works project? Well, the answer is probably not what you're thinking.
So that 87 million pesos? That's not for some big one-off project. No, that's the average budget for each and every one of the 318 members of the House. And that's just a tiny slice of an absolutely massive 27.7 billion peso total budget. A number that big, well, it deserves a much, much closer look.
All right, first things first. Let's just try to get our heads around the sheer scale of this budget we're talking about. And this really gets to the heart of the matter, doesn't it? When you're dealing with a budget this huge, you can't just glance at it. It demands serious public scrutiny. We need to know where every single peso is supposed to go because every single one of them came from us.
So how does the government officially break down this mountain of cash? Turns out it's sorted into three main spending buckets. Okay, here are the three big categories. First, you've got personnel services. That's basically for salaries and benefits. Then there's capital outlays, which is for stuff like infrastructure and equipment. And then there's the third one, the biggest one by a long shot, maintenance and other operating expenses. You'll hear it called MOOE.
And when I say the biggest, I mean it. Just look at this. Personnel services clocks in at around 8 billion pesos. Capital outlays is just 1 billion. But the MOOE, it absolutely dwarfs them at a colossal 18.58 billion pesos. This right here is where the story really gets interesting. And that brings us to the central mystery of this entire budget. It's an 18.5 billion peso question. Where on earth does all that MOE money actually go?
Now, to be fair, some of the MOE seems pretty straightforward. About 3.42 billion pesos goes to things you'd totally expect. You know, office supplies, electricity and water bills, repairs, general maintenance. That all sounds reasonable enough for running Congress.
But here's the catch. That only covers a small fraction of the total. The real head-scratcher is the remaining 15.16 billion pesos. That's the vast majority of the MOE. And according to the source material, this money is put into really vague categories with very little detailed disclosure. It's almost impossible to track. And if we break down that murky 15 billion, we see these huge chunks for things like travel, communication, and even confidential funds. But look at the biggest slice of the pie, a staggering 4.18 billion pesos just labeled professional services. I mean, what does that even mean? So let's start following these breadcrumbs. Let's dig into the evidence that's been presented and the very serious questions being asked. One lawmaker, Congressman Leandro Laviste, has actually been raising the alarm about this. He said, and I'm quoting him here, "Since October, I have been asking for a more detailed breakdown, but I was told to stop asking questions." I mean, wow. Being told to stop asking questions about how public money is spent, that's a pretty big red flag. And here's why people are so concerned. Get this, the original budget proposal was actually much smaller. But then, later on, a new version of the bill came out, and the MOE budget had suddenly ballooned by 7.83 billion pesos. And the really crazy part? Apparently this happened with no public committee report or consultation. An increase that big with so little oversight? That's highly unusual. So let's circle back to that enormous 4.18 billion for professional services. The questions being asked are pretty serious. Is this money funding social media trolls or keyboard warriors like some sources allege? Are there really reports of consultants being paid in cash, literally delivered in backpacks? And maybe the biggest question of all, why isn't there a public list of who these consultants are and what they're being paid to do?
Okay, so what does this all mean for an individual lawmaker? Let's walk through the math presented in the source documents. You start with that total allocation of 87.11 million pesos. Estimates suggest around 17 million of that is directly received as basic MOE. That leaves a potential balance of over 30 million pesos unaccounted for per congressperson. And if you multiply that across the entire House, You're looking at a potential 10 billion pesos in total MOE with some very fuzzy accounting. So, with all of this on the table, where do we go from here? Well, this has led to a major call for transparency and a pretty clear path forward.
At the end of the day, it really just boils down to this fundamental principle. The people's money should be used for the people, and the people have a right to know how it is used. That's it. That's the bedrock of any functioning, trustworthy government.
In the proposed path to getting that trust back, it isn't complicated. The calls are for three key things. First, full disclosure, a detailed public breakdown of every expense. Second, mandatory liquidation, requiring receipts for all spending. And third, public identification of all consultants in the work they're doing. These are just basic standards of transparency. And so, after following the money, after looking at all the evidence and all the questions, we are left right back where we started. The central multi-billion peso question is still hanging in the air, unanswered. Where does that 18.58 billion peso MOE really go?